I think we're good. So thanks for joining me today. As you know, I started Just Get Out of Town, and this is JGOOT Village, the place where we talk about the JGOOT way of travel. JGOOT, of course, standing for Just Get Out of Town. And if you followed me for any amount of time, you know that I teach methods so that you can travel for an average of 20 cents on the dollar. Now, most people will ask, they say, what does that mean? And so let me just kind of show my screen. That'll keep me on track. And we can kind of talk about it from there. So share screen, bear with me. Okay. I think you should see my screen now. Let me just look. Oops, my screen's frozen. Okay. So we teach clients to travel for 20 cents on the dollar. And the main goal of doing that is one of two things. One, so that you can travel in business class for coach prices. And then for other people who have large families or maybe solo travelers who just want to travel more often, that allows you to travel 3 to 5 times as often. So those two rules kind of go into play and allow you to travel better, travel more, whatever you like. But a lot of people ask, what does that mean? What does it mean to travel for 20 cents on the dollar? And my definition of that is quite simply that you can take business class flights, like a $5,000 business class flight for $1,000. You can fly in $500 coach class fares and find flights that are $100. Same planes, same seats as other people that paid $500. But it's just a timing thing. There are certain strategies that we teach that you can go and do yourself. They're all public sites that are out there on the internet that you can just grab up and take that savings and apply it towards, so instead of just spending a half or 2/3 of your budget on flights, you can apply it towards better rooms, better accommodations, more activities, better eating out, whatever you like. So, let's talk a little bit more about that. So traveling for 20 cents on the dollar is kind of an ambiguous term. And some people might say, well, that doesn't mean anything to me if you're talking about a $500 fare to Hawaii, because I live in New York, or I live in LA, and that's not that great of a deal. So, and what I've started using and what I've started sharing with our subscribers is what I call the $120 rule. And basically what that does is it normalizes flight prices from wherever you are. So that way you can determine, by using this rule, you can determine whether a flight is a good deal or not. So what the $120 rule does is it allows you to evaluate if something is a good deal, like say a flight to Hawaii. You can look at that and decide if a $500 flight is a good deal. And if you live in LA, it might not be all that great a deal because the general rule is $120 per hour. And flights to Hawaii, just shy of 6 hours if it were a direct flight. And so 6 hours, $120 an hour, that translates into a $720 fare that most people pay from the West Coast, whether it's San Diego, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, whatever. Most of those folks are going to pay about $720 in normal circumstances. Peak season, a little more, slow season, a little less. But on average, most people traveling the traditional way will pay $720 to fly to Hawaii from the West Coast. Now, if you live on the East Coast, New York, Miami, that's more like a 10, if not 11-hour flight. So standard rates to fly from New York to Hawaii is more like $1,200 for a coach fare. So by having that general rule, you can apply it for anywhere you want. LA to Vegas, it's a 1-hour flight. Most people can find something for $120. If you pay more, you're probably paying more than market rate because it's last minute, because it's during a busy weekend, who knows? If you're paying less, great. If you pay $80, well, you got that flight for 66 cents on the dollar. Not bad. Our goal is to never pay more than 50 cents on the dollar. So, but to take that example a little further, let's just compare LA to Vegas. That's a $120 flight for normal fares. LA to New York, that's about a 5-hour flight. And that would kind of, using this logic, that would translate into more like a $600 fare. So that gives you a baseline. Anywhere in the world, same thing. LA to Asia, 10 or 11-hour flight. New York to Asia, 14 or 15-hour flight. Do the math, figure out what your baseline is. And by the JGOOT way of travel, our rule is never pay more than 50% of a normal fare. So you could just kind of, even if you don't know it, you could look it up. But most people have a rough idea of about how many hours flying to Asia might be, flying to Europe might be, flying to Mexico. All of those have normal rates that most people pay. And whenever you're traveling the JGOOT way, the most important thing is to just make sure that you're getting a good enough price below normal prices. So let's talk about a couple examples on that. And if that makes sense, if people have clarifying questions, go ahead and chime in. Let me know if I'm doing okay, just chime in, makes sense. That's a starting point for everyone, where no matter where you live in the world, that way you can look at a deal. And if we share a price with our subscribers and say, this is a $350 flight to Paris that's in October, plus or minus a month, you can off the top of your head decide how good a deal that is. And again, if you live in New York, that's not as good a deal as if you live in LA. That's a screaming deal from LA. It's a pretty good deal for New York. So yeah, chime in with any comments and let me know how I'm doing if you have any questions on that topic. And by the way, Brooke is just kind of helping me keep on top of the questions so I don't have to scroll through all of them. And so Jen would like to know if price is round trip or one way. So again, for the purposes of this, the $120 rule is just for a baseline round trip fare. So if you're evaluating the average price of what most people pay to go to Hawaii, say LA to Hawaii, we'll call that a 6-hour flight. That's $700, $720 round trip, what most people pay. So that would be your starting point. We typically don't share flights to Hawaii from the West Coast unless they're under 300, sometimes under 200. And those are what you're looking for as well. Quick side note, as you know, we closed down membership to our newsletter subscribers. So if you are an existing newsletter subscriber, great, you're in as long as you remain a subscriber. What we've started to do in 2021 is more of this. Education on how to find the fares that we find for yourself. Let's see. Cindy would like to know if you're just counting hours. So again, to clarify this is if you were on a direct flight. That's just a good general rule of thumb of what normal flight prices would be. There might be a layover involved. There might be an extra stop or two. That doesn't matter. We're just kind of trying to determine a baseline so that off the top of your head, you know at a glance if a certain flight to a certain area is a good deal or not. In other words, if you live in New York and you're looking at a 7-hour flight to Europe, that's $840 baseline. That's your baseline. So that way you can look at that, and based on JGOOT rules, don't ever pay more than 50% of a normal fare. That means that you should aim for $400 and something or less from New York. Now, if you're in LA, that might be more like a $500 figure because you're talking about more like a 10-hour flight as your baseline fare to judge whether or not something is a good deal. Let's see. Very good question, Jen. And I meant to get to this. So Jen asks, would you like, she would like to know if I think the number that $120 number will hold true when more travel resumes in 2021, or will it increase? Very good question. And I meant to get to this. I would actually say, I mean, this $120 rule has been a rule that I've used just so I can quickly assess if something's a good deal or not. I would actually say that right now, during COVID with travel restrictions, it's actually a little lower across the board everywhere. Not a lot lower, but a little lower. On average, the math is probably easier. You can just probably say about $100 per hour of direct flight time. Again, don't worry about if there are layovers, not the actual flight time of a trip you're looking at, but just in general, how long would it take to get from A to B if you flew direct? What I would say is, Jen, you have some very good insight. I would say that when travel resumes again, the whole world has a great big case of cabin fever, and the airlines are going to take quite a while before they can get up and running full steam again. So we're going to have a serious supply and demand issue. Now, this is not me. We're not on commission. This is not me trying to twist anyone's arm into joining our service or using our help or anything like that. But my job is to use my number analysis skills to help people travel as affordably as possible. And I do believe that, Jen, I believe you're correct. Prices will go up, probably higher than we've seen in decades, once travel becomes more popular, as more people get vaccinations, as more countries open their borders, as hospitals get hospitalization rates under control. All of that is going to point towards people saying we can travel more. It already is. Our fourth quarter statistics of new members told us that, and that's why we decided to close down for new newsletter subscribers. So good question, Jen. Let's see if my examples help clarify this a little bit more. So let's just plug a few sample fares in just so we can talk about this. So my wife and I went to Cabo once, roughly a 5-hour flight for us. And again, this is great because when we publish a deal, a great deal in Chicago or Boston might not be such a great deal from Houston or San Diego. So this rule helps you decipher what a good deal is. So for us to determine that this was a great deal worth jumping on, I stumbled across $110 flights, and I said, "Hey, Michelle, you know, what are we doing over Thanksgiving?" And this was not during 2020. This was before that. And we checked our calendars. We had to leave a day earlier than traditional Thanksgiving holiday. But yeah, we found $110 flights. That's normally about a $600 fare, plus or minus 20%. And so that's a no-brainer. I mean, even if you have 500,000 frequent flyer points, you shouldn't waste those points, and you should snatch up that fare at $110. So that's 18 cents on the dollar. That's a screaming deal. I don't care how many points you have, you're better off paying for it with cash. And you know, talking about the opportunity cost of points versus cash is a lesson in itself. We can save that for later. But suffice it to say, our general rule: never pay more than 50%. Aim for 5 or 10 or 20%. And you can travel a lot more for the same budget as what most people spend traveling the traditional way. Jacqueline is asking if $120 works for business class. No, there's a simple rule for that. I'll actually show an example of that. So let's see. Let's try another example. Here's one that we can kind of compare a couple different scenarios. So these are my childhood best friends. I've got my brother, Jason, there, and then Hien and Hua. So we grew up in California. Hien and Hua still live in California, and they're teachers. So they have, and then my brother lives, at this time he lived in Maine, and we get together almost every year, probably every year or two, and we just get the four of us together, have a fun fishing trip. And in this case, we went out to Maine. My brother found a cool cabin on a lake, and we just hung out for a few days fishing. As you can see there, Jason started our first night up with some lobster. But he and Anwa live in California. We had very specific time to work with. And so this was before they were really starting to travel the JGOOT way. And I thought it would be a fun way to compare and contrast. So Wa, the ultra organized, extremely prepared person, booked his flight like 4 months before our trip. He paid about $350. Now they live in LA. We flew not to Maine, but to Boston and then drove up together. So he paid about $350 for his flight. Not bad. That's about, LA to Boston. That's about a 5-hour flight. That's about a $600 baseline. So $350, pretty good. 60 cents on the dollar. Hien waited a bit longer. Hien is the animated, fun, spontaneous, last-minute planner. He waited until less than a month out. He paid the mid 400s to fly out. I used the JGOOT way of travel, looked religiously every day. I paid $85. Now, baseline, I'm from Colorado, so that's only a 4-hour flight, but still, $500-ish, $480 baseline, $85 flight. Again, I'm doing better than 20 cents on the dollar. Caveat, I did some extra credit there. So I watched every day. I found like a $350 fare, but I did one extra trick. I broke it down into one-way flights. Turns out it was 280 one way, 270 one way, and 80 the other way. So I did two things. I snatched up the $80 fare, and I used frequent flyer points for the $280 fare, and those cost me $5. And it took a lot less frequent flyer points. So there are a lot of different rules in place there, but that's a great example of how drastically different, what drastically different prices can be. How drastically different prices can be with just a few simple tweaks to how you go about looking for fares. Moral of that story, well, I mean, I got lucky, found a $350 fare, did an extra twist and saved a ton off of that. But the moral of that story is look every day. And if you have a specific place you need to go, you can still get a pretty good deal. If you look every day and go where the deals are, or plan your vacations around where the deals are, the savings are unbelievable. As in, like, flight costs and sometimes hotel costs don't even need to be a consideration when it comes to planning for vacations. So one more example. Oh, there's just a picture of us on our dock fishing. Mike Jensen here submitted an example. They took a vacation. They flew to Hawaii for $250. Now, they didn't say where they're from, but again, from New York, that's a screaming deal. From LA, that's still a pretty darn good deal that still beats the better than 50 cents on the dollar rule that we teach our subscribers to apply when they're traveling. Looks like we have a few more questions here. Jackie, okay, that's first class. Deal from LA to Kona for $160. Great, grab it. August, plenty in advance. Again, LA to Kona for $160. That's easily less than 20 cents on the dollar, even if you have frequent flyer points. Snatch it up. Apply your savings towards better, more fun stuff, because it'll be the same plane on the seat, or same seat on the plane. Bridget would like to know if these are direct flights. So what we do is teach our clients how to find travel deals that are a minimum of 50% off, sometimes as much as 95% off. In other words, sometimes you can find a $500 flight for 10 or 20 bucks. And every scenario is different. Sometimes they're direct flights, sometimes they have an extra layover. What we do is teach you how to find them and what strategies to use based on what your needs are. And then you can look at the flight, you can look at the itinerary and decide if it works for you. If it has an extra layover that you don't want to deal with, you're on Travelocity, you're on Expedia, you're on Google Flights, scroll down the list and see how much more it costs for a direct flight. The idea here is that every day you're casting a wide net. You're seeing all sorts of options. And what we do, we find 3 to 5 trips a day for our subscribers. And if it looks good, you dig a little deeper. If after digging a little deeper, it doesn't look good, no big deal. You'll find more tomorrow. And eventually you'll find one that is at such a good price, maybe it's worth the extra layover. We have one subscriber who actually, Katie, I think she's on this call. She just posted their trip to Brazil. They intentionally extended their layover so that they could get out and explore the city during their trip. So it was like a free stopover. So the idea here is to kind of look for the deals and then follow those deals like a vein of silver. And eventually you hit the mother lode and it works out. Sometimes you don't hit the mother lode and you just get some pocket change of silver. But the key is to find those opportunities, follow that vein of silver. And every once in a while, I mean, even if you just found one every 3 months, that's an extraordinary trip 4 times a year that you could probably do on the budget of what you used to spend looking the old-fashioned way. Let's see. Business class, lots of questions on business class. Let me skip ahead. Just another example. Let's talk about Asia. We don't know where Stella's from, but if she's from the West Coast, that's a 10 or 11 hour flight, $1,300 baseline, 348, that's 25 cents on the dollar. If she's flying from the East Coast, that's an even better deal because that's probably more like a $1,500, $1,600 flight. So again, what we're looking for is perspective. We don't, just because Expedia says it's a good deal, doesn't mean it's a good deal. It's always a good idea to just have that baseline of what does it cost in order to get to a certain region. And in fact, for our JGOOT Lounge subscribers, so this is JGOOT Village where we talk all about cool concepts like this. JGOOT Lounge is our elite concierge program where we do a lot more, we offer a lot more guidance, give a lot more support, answer a lot of direct questions. We've got a whole team on the inside who is there to answer questions just like this every day. And the first thing we do when people become JGOOT Lounge subscribers or JGOOT Lounge clients is we give them a tear sheet that basically says, new rules, don't ever pay, like pin this sheet up on your wall. Don't ever pay more than $100 in the 48 states. Don't ever pay more than $200 in Mexico. And then we proceed to show them how to find those kind of bargains. And you know, we go through the 2 rules of the JGOOT way of travel so that they can slowly and surely become more and more experts at the JGOOT way of travel. So business class, everyone's asking about that. So as a general rule, that 120 is your baseline. As a general rule, business class is 3 to 5 times the cost of that. And I don't like to give a number. It's a lot easier to just remember that one figure, $120 an hour. And then if you want to do business class, it's almost a given that it will be 3 to 5 times more expensive. So your 10-hour flight to Asia from the West Coast, that's $1,200 baseline, 10 hours at $120 an hour. You want to upgrade that to business class, your normal coach fare round trip is going to be minimum $3,600, as much as $6,400 from the West Coast. Add 3 or 4 hours on the East Coast and apply that rule. First class is typically going to be 5 to 10 times that cost. So, but again, it's usually best to just kind of have that $120 an hour baseline and then multiply it for business class. So we get this a lot. I talk about being able to fly in business class for coach prices. Let's apply my logic in this case. So this is an email we got last week, just after Christmas, and it came from Robin, and she is going to Grenada, not Granada, Spain, Grenada, the island that is about an 8-hour flight from LA. Go ahead, Google it, look it up. Let me know if I'm incorrect in that. But Grenada is just off the coast of Venezuela, 8-hour flight, 8 times 120. That's what, $960. Call it $1,000. She did it for, and that's a coach fare. So what I say is, when you use this strategy, when you look for deals every day, and then you follow those deals like a vein of silver, and see if you can find dates that work for you. You see if it's not an obnoxiously long layover, which I've got a point on that. But you're looking, it's like panning for gold. You're panning for gold every day. Every once in a while you find something that's usually an indicator that you can go upstream and find a way better deal. So that's what this is. She found a fare. I believe we published it for 5 something. She played around with it, found dates that worked for her that were a little more expensive, but $630 for a business class fare is easily a $900 or $1,000 coach fare from LA. Maybe a little cheaper because of COVID. If that's coach, take that and multiply it by 3. That's a $3,000 to $5,000 business class fare. Feel free to chime in if, for those business class travelers out there, feel free to chime in for business class flights from the West Coast to Far East Caribbean. Those are easily $3,000 or $5,000 fares. She picked it up. They're going for $630. We've got stories like that. Not as often as coach fares. Most of our travelers just prefer to travel 5 times as often in coach. And this probably would have been a $300 flight in coach. But we have tons of business class subscribers who do that same thing. And again, it's that exact same vein of silver concept. And it's a lot easier to look for the coach deals and then just click a couple buttons to see how much more business class is. 2 out of 3 times, if you can find a dirt cheap coach class fare, you're also going to find a dirt cheap business class fare. And that all kind of comes back to rule number 1 of the JGOOT way of travel, which is look every day. Deals at 50, 60, 90% off are not going to wait around for when you get around to looking for a deal. I don't care how good you are at finding deals. I'm pretty good at finding good deals, but if I'm not looking every day, there are an infinite amount of deals that I'm going to miss out on, and I won't be able to find on the days I decide to look. So our philosophy is look every day, have a system, take a few minutes a day, and every once in a while when something hits, follow through and see if it works with your calendar. Okay, lots of other questions. Let me see if I had any other examples. I think this was it. Okay, we'll come back to homework. Let me answer some questions. I answered ties. Bridget, yes. Katie. Katie would like to know, when you say using the points costs you $5, is that a fee to use the points? So whenever you're using points, you usually, sometimes you don't have to, but nine times out of 10, when you're redeeming points, the flight itself is free. It's only at the cost of whatever points that they're charging. And then usually when I talk about it costing $5, that's taxes. I've gone to funerals last minute and paid $11. I've gone to Asia in business class using points and I've paid anywhere from 50 to $100. And those are thousands of dollar business class flights. Whole nother topic on point hacking. Real quick, the JGOOT way of travel involves 2 rules. 1, look every day and go where the deals are, because there are obscene deals out there waiting for you. But if you're not looking every day, you miss them, and you don't even know that they existed. So, you settle for a $400 flight to Mexico, not even knowing that $100 and $200 and $220 flights to Mexico pop up every once in a while on the same dates you would have gone. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is use a very small, manageable amount of point hacking to have an emergency stash of frequent flyer points for when you can't find a good deal. So like my friend's fishing trip, my friends didn't have points, so they had no choice but to settle for the best deal they could find. I would have been in the same scenario, and I would have paid $350, but it turns out one way was $80, the other way was $270. So I used points for that, because that's really expensive for a one-way flight. Doesn't meet my 50% rule, so I'm going to use points. So there are a lot of nuances to those 2 rules. There's a little bit of math. We deal with that math when we find trips. We're not going to tell our subscribers about deals unless they're at least 50% off. But you can apply the rule I just taught you and do the same yourself. The key is to just be consistent and look every day. Let's see. Business class. Donna's done her homework. Donna wants to know, when I say look every day, are you looking on Kayak or Airfare Watchdog or Travelocity? So it depends on your circumstances. So there are several different reasons you might be looking for a trip. And the more flexible you are, the better a deal you're going to find. And that determines where you look. So if you have a very specific travel schedule and you can't get time off of work except next Thanksgiving, well, that's something you would use. I would either set up a search on Kayak or set up a search on Google. Google Flights has an anywhere feature that allows you to pick a date, and they'll show you a map of all of the best deals during those dates. So if you just want to go on vacation, but you have specific time constraints, you won't get the best deal because you've limited your search to those times. But by doing that, pick your day, pick your vacation window, watch those fares every day, as early as 12 months before a trip. And most days, it's kind of like just, it's just like checking the headlines of a newspaper. Most of them won't interest you, but every once in a while, something looks good, you'll read the whole article. And so the same principle applies. And what site you look at, I mean, they're all great, but they all have a specific purpose. And that's something, I mean, those are 3 classes in themselves that we teach inside of JGOOT Lounge on assessing your needs, assessing where you want to go, when you want to go, if you have flexibility on when you want to go. Because if you're flexible, if you're just willing to go where the deals are, like those are where the unbelievable trips are. And so it depends on what those needs are, where you would look. Let's see. So Sarah would like to know, is there a specific day that's best to look for deals or just look every day? There used to be some rules that were valid. Yeah, I think there's a rumor of first Tuesday at like 1 a.m. I don't know how much validity to it, but that's at least 2 or 3 decades old. With this day and age, information is instant. It's pretty instant across all platforms with just minor variances. And my rule that has worked for me for 8 years since I discovered this way of travel is just look every day, because there is no method that will work better than just waiting for the right deal. And another analogy is, which is easier to negotiate with your boss or with the airline for them to drop the price to fit your vacation schedule, or with your boss because you said, hey, I just found $110 flights to Cabo, but we have to leave on Tuesday instead of Wednesday of Thanksgiving week. Can I get an extra day off? I mean, your boss might ask you if he can go too, or if you could tell him where you got the flights. So that's kind of our philosophy. Nothing beats looking every day. There's an old Office episode where Dwight tries to beat a computer, and it kind of reminds me of that. You just can't fight the odds of the amazing deals that come and go in 24 to 48 hour periods that won't be around if you just look even once a week. In fact, Katie, who is one of our expert moderators inside JGOOT Lounge, Katie just posted, if you scroll down on JGOOT Village, she just posted a Brazil trip. And she said, they're very savvy travelers. They've had a very high priority on taking their family on a trip once a week. And I believe in the post, she said that within a month or two of watching our fare alerts, using our methodologies of just looking every day, they found a trip that was $200 cheaper than any trip they've ever found to Brazil. And they go every year. They've paid as much as $2,100. And I think before this trip, they had paid as little as $700, and they booked a $500 fare by just looking every day. And if I'd like to flesh that out, and then I'll get back to some more questions. So Katie actually passed that feedback on to me. I thought it was more like a $460 fare, but whatever, 500 is still a win. And she said, I don't know how you do it. And I said, we have a team that looks for these deals every day. And it's not that we have any magic tricks. It's that we look every day. She said, I would look at least weekly. Well, so she looks weekly. If we look every day, we're 7 times as likely to find something. And just let that sink in. These deals, every once in a while, something to Cabo is going to plummet in price because the airline needs to fill some butts in seats. Those deals are going to get snatched up. They're going to drop it on like 6 or 8 seats. Someone's going to buy them and prices will go back up. And, the airline will be happy because it's 10 months out and they're staying at 10 months sold. They don't have to worry about canceling a flight. The next day, it might be to Brazil. The next day, it might be to the Philippines. And all you got to do is just watch for them. But just to compare that example of Katie, who is a savvy traveler, and she's probably better at ferreting out deals than me, but by looking every day, we're not fighting the odds. And it's no different than going to the gym every day versus going to the gym once a week. That's our philosophy, and it's worked for us and thousands of subscribers. So let me see here. Several people would like to know which travel sites to look up these deals. The big thing is just the consistency. Whatever you're most comfortable with. If you're comfortable with Google Flights, watch Google Flights and bookmark it and watch it every day. I'm going to give you some homework, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. Kristen has heard that looking every day drives flight prices up. Very good point. There is a rumor that I have actually seen myself that if you look every day and you watch one specific location, then they will sense that you're planning a vacation, and the search engines, I have seen evidence that the search engines will artificially raise prices on you to give you the impression that prices are going up to hopefully kick you off the fence. The secret to that is if you're looking every day for like a destination wedding, you have to go to Cabo. Sure, you might tip the search engines off that you're planning on going to Cabo on certain dates. Before you book your flight, just change browsers. Use a different browser or use a different search engine. They're all roughly the same. Travelocity, Expedia, Orbitz, Kayak, Google Flights. They all have pretty similar prices, but just switch either to a different browser or to a different search engine. And sometimes that price will go back down. That's only if you're looking at one specific place every day. What I'm talking about is look at all the options possible, because then you're playing the odds. And you're a lot more likely to find something. But great question. Let me see. Daphne. If the fare from LA to Grenada is still available, we can check and see. Usually they do disappear within about 48 hours. But it's easy enough to just look and poke around. Kayak, and we have a video about this somewhere. Kayak has it's called a flexible search feature, and most of them probably do. But let's say you want to go somewhere June 10th to June 17th. You can turn on the flexible dates, and they will look from the 7th to the 13th outbound, and then from the from the 14th to the 20th, and they'll show you the best combinations of dates. That in itself is a great trick whenever you're looking. So on that note, you can watch every day. You can use the flexible dates feature. You can play around with the dates and eventually find something if it's out there. And again, big thing here, vein of silver concept. If you know that it's out there, if someone publishes that they just booked a great deal on JGOOT Village, go and look for yourself. None of these things are guaranteed, but there's usually a little opening, and that's going to indicate that those prices are out there, and you can just go and search. One of our most traveled subscribers, Daniel Stresky, also a valuable contributor inside of JGOOT Lounge, quit keeping track after 50 countries. He said he had to start looking through his passport to see what he's been to. But before JGOOT, he had only traveled to 5 countries. And he said he's now been to 70. We finally, at a party, we put, put the pressure on him to count, and he looked at his passport. But what he doesn't even, like, we send him the notification of trips that are out there. We provide links with sample searches of where you might still be able to find that fare. But we also just give guidelines of like, okay, we found this fare in September. You can also find it in August and in early October. He doesn't even use the links. We link to Kayak because that's the most flexible for us. That's how our team finds the deals. And those are the links we provide. He ignores it. He just goes to Google Flights because that's what he prefers. And he just reads our subject line that says, whatever, Grenada, business class, $500 something, October through December, and he'll just go and poke around on his own. So all you need is that indicator that there is a vein of silver to follow. Go and follow it and see if you can find something that works for you. Do you need to browse Incognito? And again, so the big thing is, if you're looking at a specific place, yeah, sure. But that usually, what Jen is saying, do you need to browse Incognito or clear your cookies when you're searching every day? And that's usually when you're searching for a specific place. And again, it's really only necessary once you get to the point of booking. And I mean, these have extremely sophisticated algorithms, and they're just set to pick up on those search habits, and they might raise the price on you. I wouldn't worry about it until you're ready to book. And inside JGOOT Lounge, we have, I call them 10 Hail Marys, and these are 10 Hail Mary plays that you can resort to if you can't find a cheap trip. And one of those is, before you book, just clear your cache, clear your cookies, try a different browser just to make sure that the browser isn't, that Travelocity or Expedia or whatever the search engines aren't trying to trick you into a higher price. Terry would like to know, when do airlines open their schedules? So I've seen them as early as 2 years out. They vary, and they vary whether it's a cash price or a points price. Sometimes points aren't released until much later. And every airline varies. In general, the fares that we find are as far as about 10 months out. We rarely find anything that is heavily discounted a full year out, but 10 months, That's probably 10 or 15% of our deals. Most of these heavily discounted fares that my team finds, following the rules that we've applied for about 6 years now, 8 years since I started doing it for myself. Now I forgot the question. Do you look every day? Oh, when do airlines release their schedules? Sorry. I would say 60% of our deals are 1 to 2 months out. The remaining 40% are kind of spread out between, I mean, you can find last minute deals. We don't look for those for our newsletter subscribers because most people don't prefer last minute travel, and there are better resources for last minute travel. So we aim for the 50, 60% of deals that are 1 to 2 months out. And then because of COVID, we're trying to look for farther deals out. But again, we have those standards where we're not going to waste your time unless it's at least 50% discounted. And so if you're looking for Thanksgiving of 2021, it's just getting to that window where those opportunities are going to open up. And think of it this way. So the best way I've come to explain this is these aren't mistake fares. Sometimes they are, but most of the time it's fully intentional. Sometimes it's a flash sale. Sometimes it's, I call them butt-in seat fares, remnant seat fares. And what it is like, let's say 10 months out, the airline computer algorithm says, hey, we're in trouble. We've got 10 planes going to Cancun, and we've been selling them for $550, $600, but on average, we should be 10% sold right now, but we're only 7% sold. Let's just dump the price, get 20 butts in seats so we don't have to cancel any flights. Because if, and they have checkpoints along the way, 8 months out, 6 months out, 2 months out, if they're not 70% booked across all of their planes, they're going to slash prices on some seats. And our philosophy is just look for those seats and go there. I mean, I've been to countless places that I wouldn't have even considered, but we went because it was dirt cheap. When my wife and I were married or were dating, and I should share, I divorced about 8 years ago. That's when I discovered travel, thanks to a pilot friend. Started taking my kids on lots and lots of trips. And when my wife and I were dating, it was getting serious, like not engagement serious yet, but people were starting to talk. And I said, hey, do you want to go back home to Indiana and meet your parents? And she and I knew that it wasn't for a big announcement, but all of her friends started talking. Oh, Joel and Michelle are getting serious. No, we just went because we found $29 flights. Had no intention of going into Indiana. Maybe, once we were talking about getting engaged, but what the heck? It was $29 flights. Those are normally $300. Why not just plan a trip around it and pocket $500 for two of us? And who cares what we do? Who cares where we stay? We got $30 round trip flights. So that's kind of the philosophy here. If look for the deals, plan your vacations around the deals when you can find them at 10 or 20 cents on the dollar, and spend the difference however you want. More travel, better seats, better accommodations, more excursions. Works for us, works for thousands of our subscribers. Let's see. Lori would like to know if I advise using skip lagged. Skip lagged is one of our 10 Hail Marys. It's typically a last resort because skip lagged is a search site that requires, it picks up great screaming deals, but they're almost always going to be very inconvenient. Red-eye flights, extra layovers, if not multiple layovers, but they are a great last resort if you have no other choice. Now, when you travel the JGOOT way, our philosophy is you should never find yourself in that position. I try to educate my subscribers on use 2, maybe 3 of those Hail Mary rules if you can't find a cheap flight. After that, use points, because points are so much easier to earn than dollars. And if you save them for those emergency use cases, You don't need to turn your life upside down juggling dozens of credit cards. Daniel is another example. He's only paid cash for his flights. He's never used points. I finally twisted his arm into getting a credit card, so he just had an emergency stash. And he confided in me. He said, I still don't know what to do with the points. I mean, I have them because you told me to get them, but I just go where the deals are and I don't ever need to use points. And they've visited family in Chicago and Florida and all around for 20, 30, 40 bucks. He's been to all over Asia, all over Europe, because he finds $200 trips. Flights to Africa, rarely more than 500 bucks. He found a $290 flight to Portugal, which happens to be a $20 ferry ride to Morocco. So by just pouncing on a Portugal flight and then hopping on a $20 ferry, he got to Morocco for $310 instead of the normal $500 or $600 that it normally costs to get there. So it's just mostly about applying a couple rules, being disciplined about it, just like, if you want results at the gym, you should go every day. And you could put in half the effort every day and get better results than looking just once a week and doing, or going to the gym and working out once a week and working out really hard. So we're approaching an hour. I think I've covered most of the questions. Let me see. Jen also wants to know what I think of hacker fares. I don't know. I've never resorted to it. And again, I don't have to. I have a safety net of backup points, and I've got 2 or 3 methods. I've got my favorite search engine, Kayak. I'll always check fares first because I don't waste points unless I absolutely have to. I'll check Google Flights. I haven't had to resort to skip lagged in years. I haven't had to resort. Hopper is a good one for just watching every day. It's not my preference, but it works just as well. And it's mostly just preference, and applying your own system is what I recommend. I don't care if it's Google Flights, Kayak, Travelocity, Expedia, which is now the same thing. But just look every day. And I'm going to try to wrap things up and get to our homework so that you can actually apply this for your own needs. So let me see if Himal, other resources for last minute travel. I don't know. Typically last minute travel, I follow the same rules. And I'll share one other story. Once there was a conference from a speaker who I had followed for years, really admired him, found out Sunday morning he was putting a conference on Monday through Wednesday the following week. Talked with my wife. We decided we could make it work. I assumed it was going to be a really expensive flight. And so I assumed I was going to have to dip into my stash of points. I got on Kayak. I searched, tinkered with the dates because I was thinking of just leaving Monday morning. And then I realized that if I left that night, I could go for 37 bucks. So I didn't need points. I didn't need any fancy apps. I just looked and I booked. If I found expensive flights, which I was assuming was going to be the case, and I didn't like those prices, I would have just used points. I would have had no more than a half hour invested in finding a flight to Vegas. And by having those 2 rules, I don't need to worry about all of the different apps and all of the different solutions and which is best for my needs. In 6 years, I've used Kayak on a daily basis. When I need to search for a flight myself, I'll use Google Flights. And if after some, minimal effort, I don't find prices I like, i.e. at least 50% below normal market rate, I use points. And so I don't mess with all of that other stuff. So for anyone who's thinking, I don't want to mess with looking every day, this is more about like taking 1 to 10 minutes a day to look for bargain flights that you're going to brag about for the rest of your life. And when you find it, put a little bit of energy into looking at your calendars to see if it can work. That is so much easier than trying to juggle all of these different apps, all of these different websites, and try to find the best deals. It's what works for me. It's what's worked for thousands of our subscribers. do use that information as you like. So I think that covers all of the questions. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you so much for relaying those questions. Let's move on to just some real life examples. This really is simple, you guys. And the biggest thing is to let go of an agenda. A lot of people say, well, I go to Cabo every year. All right, that's fine. If you go every year and it's specific dates, probably going to be a points flight, because that's probably when everyone else goes and it's probably really expensive. But the beauty of this system is that, and I think if we were to poll, in fact, let's do this. For any JGOOT subscribers who are subscribers to our newsletters, I'd love to ask what percentage of the trips that they booked that we shared were they actually planning? And I would be willing to bet that it's a very, very low percentage. Doesn't mean you have to be a last minute traveler. Doesn't mean you have to go at a time you don't want to go. You can still take that Thanksgiving trip. You just might go to Cancun instead of Cabo. You might go to Belize instead of Cabo, and it will be cheaper than if you were to plan a trip around Cabo, hoping that those planets align perfectly with your calendar and your checkbook. I mean, you're just going where the deals are, and you're not trying to fight the system to find a deal to the specific place that you want to go. So homework. What I would say is write down 20 to 30 places. This is your bucket list. I mean, the obvious stuff, you know, everyone wants to go to Bali, which is worth going to. We loved it, but we went because a deal worked with our schedule to go there. Everyone wants to go to Bali. Everyone wants to go to Thailand. Everyone wants to go to Paris. Write all of those places down and start watching them. Google Flights has an anywhere feature. If you're like most people, you can go to Google Flights and use what's called an anywhere feature. Just plug in your dates and don't fill in the destination. They will show you a big map of the best prices to any destination during that time frame. If you don't see anything you like, go back the next day and look again, because it's going to be entirely different results. And sometimes it might be the typical thing, what you expect, a cheap flight to Cabo, a cheap flight to Vegas, but other times it'll be even cheaper flights to Belize, which is almost always twice the expense. It'll be even cheaper flights to Costa Rica or Colombia or Paris. They're out there every day. You just have to watch for them. And again, the reason you have to watch every day is because they're almost always limited seats. They almost always sell out quickly. And if you're not watching for them, you miss them. So don't just write down the exotic, cool destinations. I mean, pull out a National Geographic and see what looks good. And then in addition, think about the 48 states. Think about friends and relatives you have. Think about, do you want to do national parks? So at the very least, you've got a list of 20 or 30 places. And it's almost like this law of attraction. I'm telling you, like, I'm not really a whole lot into that, but I'm telling you, if you just kind of decide that you want to go to Paris, you'll start seeing those deals if you're looking every day. I mean, it's like when you decide to buy a new car, suddenly you start seeing that car everywhere. Vacations are the same way, just most people aren't looking every day, so they don't even realize that they're out there at the prices that are available. Once you write that list down, watch them every day. Watch Kayak, watch Google. Just use the search engine that you're comfortable with. They almost all say, you search for Paris, they'll ask you if you want to save a search. Sure, save it. Airfare Watchdog is another great resource. Catch to that is you have to be flexible on when you go. But it's a great resource, and they'll just notify you of the cheapest fare they found. Sometimes it'll be in December, sometimes it'll be in July. You take 10 seconds to look at your calendar and see if it'll work. And if once a quarter one of those trips hits, you'll be traveling 4 times a year for less than you ever thought possible. I hope that information was helpful. If you could throw me some likes just so I can see that this was useful to you, that'd be great. If you'd like to be able to have these discussions on a more regular basis, that's what JGOOT Lounge is for. Reply interested if that's the case. Just type in the words interested, and someone on our team, probably Brooke, who has been fielding these calls or fielding these questions for me, someone will reach out to you and we'll see if it's a fit. This is a consulting coaching program. We're not travel agents. We're not going to plan itineraries for you, but we are going to teach you the 2 rules of the JGOOT way of travel that have worked for me and my family for the past 8 years. They changed my life 8 years ago, and they're why I eventually started JGOOT 4 years ago. And it's a simple system, and I'll be honest, it's just those 2 rules. And we just teach you the baby steps of those 2 rules. Where to look based on your needs if you're flexible on when you're going. Where else to look if you're flexible on where you're going. Where else to look if you just want the deal and will go anywhere or everywhere because you're retired or self-employed, or those are the 2 big ones. Or, you know, you have a flexible schedule at work and would be willing to take an extra day off to cut your flight costs in half. So everything we do, we teach things at a basic level. So it's quick and easy to understand. We then kind of take things to an intermediate level. We have weekly classes where you can ask questions about these rules and about these nuances. And you can say, well, I've been using Hopper. I really like it. And we can talk about why that's good for you, why it's not. And you can plug in your specific needs. So again, if this was useful, if you'd like to talk with someone about a little more hands-on guidance, that's our new goal. We're making ourselves available to a lot less people so we can give them a lot more attention so that they can accomplish whatever they want with their travel goals. So let me know if this was helpful. If I'm going to be doing this every week. If you've got topics you'd like me to cover, feel free to add those to the comments, and we'll try to take that into account with things that we talk about. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day. Make sure.